But we begin today's show in the AFC North in the best division in pro football as the Cleveland Browns are traveling to Baltimore to take on the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are favored by 6 points. It's a 1 o'clock kickoff. The over-under for this matchup is 37.5 points. Here's Lamar Jackson discussing his defense heading into this matchup.
I believe, I'm not trying to toot our horn, but I believe our defense has no weakness. Just from the defensive line, the linebacker, how they flying around and disguising defenses to make it look like one coverage, but it's something else, and how they time up their blitzes. It helps us out a lot, because we playing other teams, they flying around giving us their best shot. It's like we send one of the best defenses every day.
That was Lamar Jackson ahead of the Browns-Ravens matchup Sunday afternoon in Baltimore. So when I look at this matchup in the AFC North, obviously the AFC North is the best division in the NFL. Make no mistake about it. Right now, if the playoffs started today, all 4 teams in the AFC North, in the Pittsburgh Steelers, Cincinnati Bengals, Baltimore Ravens, and Cleveland Browns, would be in the playoffs. It's the best division in the NFL. And so I'm excited for this matchup. I'm definitely excited for this matchup. When I look at the Cleveland Browns, obviously, the strength of the Cleveland Browns has been their elite defense. I look at this Cleveland Browns defensive unit. They are led by defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz. Defensively, the Cleveland Browns have a lot of playmakers, and they are led by their best player on their football team in Myles Garrett. But he's not alone. On their defensive line, you got Dalvin Tomlinson. You got Jordan Elliott. You got Zadarius Smith as a pass rusher, okay? At linebacker, you got Anthony Walker Jr. You got Jeremiah Koromaya. And then in the secondary, you still got Denzel Ward. You got Grant Delpit. You got Greg Newsome III as well. And this Browns defense, the way that they are able to make plays, it's the best defensive unit in pro football. And in 5 major defensive categories, the Cleveland Browns are top 5 in 5 of the major defensive categories. They only give up 257 total yards per game. That's ranked first in the NFL. They only give up 145 passing yards per game. That's ranked first in the NFL. They only give up 90 rushing yards per game. That's tied for 6th in the NFL. And on third down, teams are only converting 26% on third down against this Browns defense. That's ranked first in the NFL. They playing some great football right now. And they are by far the strength of this football team. And the way that they are able to play defense, it just makes you wonder if Nick Chubb never got injured, we could be talking about this Cleveland Browns team being a legit Super Bowl contender, because that's how great Nick Chubb was as well. Nick Chubb is a top 10, arguably top 5 running back in the NFL, depending on who you ask. I do believe he's top 5 the more I think about it. And the way that the offense was built around Nick Chubb, you win football games with a great running game and playing great defense. But I thought about it as I looked at this matchup between the Browns and the Ravens, and I was thinking to myself, as great as this defensive unit for the Browns has played this year, in order for the Cleveland Browns to have a chance to upset the division leader in the Baltimore Ravens, it's not going to be on this Browns defense. It's going to be on Deshaun Watson. You look at Deshaun Watson so far this year. Deshaun Watson got 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 902 passing yards. He's completing 62% of his passes. But the reason why the Cleveland Browns traded for Deshaun Watson and gave Deshaun Watson a 5-year, $230 million guaranteed contract is because of games like this. These are the type of games you need Deshaun Watson to step up and elevate his game and not depend on the defense to carry the Cleveland Browns over the finish line. It's got to be Deshaun Watson. I'm a Deshaun Watson fan as a football player, and I got people in my ear, family, friends, who keep telling me, like, hey, when is Deshaun Watson going to get back to playing great football? Because it's been so long. It's been 3 years since we've seen Deshaun Watson play at a high level. So it is time. It's time. I never forget in the Super Bowl when the Steelers played the Packers, one of the coaches, I can't think of his name, I think he ended up passing away. He was talking to Clay Matthews, the pass rusher for the Packers last time they won a Super Bowl. He told Clay Matthews, it's time. You got to make a play. It's time for Deshaun Watson. We need Deshaun Watson to put together a great performance and go on the road and beat a division leader like the Baltimore Ravens. This is the reason why they gave Deshaun Watson all that money. And at one point, I said that Deshaun Watson was the second best quarterback that you would want to build your team around in the NFL. But because before Joe Burrow, before Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert, there was this guy named Deshaun Watson in Houston who was leading his team to the playoffs and was one of the best young quarterbacks we had in the NFL. So in order for the Cleveland Browns to be true playoff contenders and compete in the AFC North and possibly pull off an upset in Baltimore this weekend, they're going to need Deshaun Watson to play at a high level. That's exactly what they're going to need. They're going to need that. They have to get Amari Cooper involved in the offense. He's been their number one target this season. Elijah Moore, the other receiver, he's a solid receiver as well. You still got David Njoku at tight end. At running back, you got Jerome Ford. I think he's done a decent job replacing Nick Chubb. He's not Nick Chubb, but he's solid. He's decent. You still got Kareem Hunt as well in the backfield. So it's time. It's time for Deshaun Watson to put together a great performance against an elite Ravens defense. Now, when I look at the Baltimore Ravens, obviously the Baltimore Ravens are led by none other than Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow are on the same level. And when I look at who's the second best quarterback in the NFL, I say it's Burrow A and Lamar Jackson B. However you want to put them, but Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow are on the same level. And Lamar Jackson this year, he's playing well. So far this year, Lamar Jackson, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He has 1,954 passing yards, completing 72% of his passes. But when you look at Lamar Jackson in his NFL ranks amongst quarterbacks, this is amongst quarterbacks or 30 quarterbacks with at least 6 starts. Lamar Jackson, his completion percentage at 72% is ranked first in the NFL. His yards per pass attempt at 7.7 is ranked 4th in the NFL. His rushing yards per game is 49 rushing yards per game. That's ranked first in the NFL. He has 5 rushing touchdowns. That's an NFL ranked 3rd. So I said coming into the season that Lamar Jackson is going to win NFL MVP. And I thought the last 3 weeks with the Baltimore Ravens putting up over 30-plus points in the last 3 games, I feel like Lamar Jackson is starting to get into a rhythm, and we're starting to see him develop chemistry with his receivers in this offense. Because remember, in the offseason, the Ravens, they moved off of Greg Roman, and they brought in Todd Monken. And the whole goal was for Todd Monken to transition Lamar Jackson from being a running dual threat quarterback to being more of a pocket passer. And they went out and got Odell Beckham. They drafted Zay Flowers as well. They got Nelson Aguilar at receiver. You still got Devin Duvernay. And you got Mark Andrews, who's a top 5 tight end in the NFL. So not only did they move off of Greg Roman and brought in Todd Monken as their new offensive coordinator, the Ravens also added weapons for Lamar Jackson, and it's been paying off. It's been paying off. In their last 2 matchups against 2 quality playoff teams in the Detroit Lions and against the Seattle Seahawks, the Baltimore Ravens beat the Lions and Seahawks by a combined score of 75-9. This was in week 7 and in week 9. So against NFC opponents, Lamar Jackson dominates NFC teams. And I think the Lions and the Seahawks are 2 quality teams in the NFC who I would consider playoff teams. The Ravens beat both of those teams by a combined score of 75-9. They straight up embarrassed the Seattle Seahawks last week. I told my cousin going into that matchup, I said, they got the Ravens favored by too many points. Ravens were favored by like 6 points going into that matchup. And I was saying, Seahawks are a good football team who's going to the playoffs. I think that's too many points. Boy, was I wrong. I was wrong because the Baltimore Ravens embarrassed the Seattle Seahawks last week. Embarrassed them. And so that's also what I took in consideration when I looked at both of these 2 elite defenses, because the Baltimore Ravens also have an elite defense. They are led by defensive coordinator Mike McDonald. And so far this year, you look at the Ravens' defensive statistics. Defensively, the Ravens only give up 92 rushing yards per game. That's ranked 8th in the NFL. They only give up 296 total yards per game. That's ranked 2nd in the NFL. And teams only throw for 171 passing yards against this Ravens defense. That's ranked 2nd in the NFL. So as great as the Cleveland Browns defense is, the Baltimore Ravens defense is just as elite. They just as elite. Up front, you got Broderick Washington. You got Michael Pierce. At linebacker, you still got Raekwon Smith. You still got Patrick Queen as well. In the secondary, you got Kyle Hamilton. You got Marlon Humphrey. You got Marcus Williams as well. So this Ravens defense is playing at a high level, and it surprised me because going into the season, that was the question that I had about this Baltimore Ravens team. I knew Lamar would be great, but I didn't know how good the Baltimore Ravens defense would be. And they have answered the call in a big, big way so far this season. And they're playing complementary football. They're playing complementary football. So, again, I look at this Ravens team. I think top to bottom, they got one of the best teams in the NFL. And another thing I wanted to talk about, too, with their running backs. We saw last week their running back, Keaton Mitchell. He had a great performance last week in the win over the Seattle Seahawks. Keaton Mitchell, he had, I think, over 138 rushing yards last week, 9 carries, averaging 15 yards per carry. You still got Gus Edwards in the backfield. You also got Justice Hill. Somehow, some way, the Ravens always find a quality back to fit into their system. They just plug the running back right into the system, and they fit. Now they got Keaton Mitchell. So they got a nice trio of running backs between Justice Hill, Gus Edwards, and Keaton Mitchell. And that's really helping this Ravens offense play at an elite level right now. So it's going to be a great matchup. Again, I think because of these 2 elite defenses, I don't think there's going to be many points scored in this game. If you're a betting man or woman, I would take the under in this matchup. And so for me, even though the Cleveland Browns have an elite defense led by Myles Garrett, and I expect Deshaun Watson to play better, I still don't think it's going to be enough. I'm rolling with the Baltimore Ravens to beat the Cleveland Browns in Baltimore. I'll go Ravens 20, Browns 17.